Hello, friends, and welcome to a rare Friday edition of the Kings of Anglia podcast. I'm your host, Mark Heath, and with me are my three fellow kings, who I shall introduce in no particular order. I'm going to start with Rossi, the Prospect Halls. I've just seen you, Rossi. It's early Friday morning. I've just seen you supping on some orange juice. I assume it's orange juice. It's not orange juice. What is it? Can you reveal?
It's mango.
Oh,
Fresh. Yeah. I'm making smoothies now, trying to keep my body all, ready for the summer. So I'm having a lot of smoothies.
New year, new you. You've got your mango
Yeah.
juice in an Ipswich Town cup, which is nice. Lovely little
Yes.
touch.
Yeah.
Moving to your left, my right, wearing a lovely little shade of pink. Is it, Stewie, that jumper? Very nice indeed.
We've had this debate before, haven't we? I don't know. Call it what you like.
I'll call it very nice, and it suits you, sir.
Ooh.
and above you, in no way indicative of his kind of ranking in this chat, is Andy, the Hutchman, Hutch Hogan Warren. Andy, you're officially off today, but you very kindly decided to join us this morning. It's very good of you. How are you?
Isn't that good of me? Yeah, I'm all right.
Hero.
I'm absolute warrior of a man. Let's talk about football for an hour. Yep, well up for that. This is salmon, by the way, if you're asking.
Is it?
Yeah, cheap salmon. My jumper.
It looks great to me.
Yeah.
No. It's salmon.
I have seen that in the flesh, and he is correct, but you would never guess that from this.
Looks like bad salmon in this light.
Yeah, well, the cheaper end of the salmon is quite light, isn't it? And then the darker the salmon, the richer the fish. And then
exactly.
Nigel G would tell you. He knows.
And there you go. I never thought we'd start that as an intro today. The darker the salmon, the richer the fish. But here we are. It's Kings of Anglia on Friday. We're recording on Friday today, and it may be something that happens more often going forward because Town have shifted their press conferences back to Thursday now with K Money in charge. K Mac likes to do it on a Thursday. So Stewie and Hutchie were involved in that yesterday. I wasn't around. So, boys, last time we spoke, it was a slightly delirious end early Tuesday morning to our transfer deadline day chat. There was much talk about stretching fingers, and it all kind of deteriorated, and we brought an end to it. Yesterday, Stewie, you got a chance to speak to Kieran McKenna for the first time since the window slammed shut. There are various things you spoke to him about. Do you want to bring us up to speed and we can start chatting about some of those in various order?
K Money explained why he didn't spend any money in the transfer window. It was, two fresh faces in, if we're not including Walton, who was already in the building, Bon as well, and 9 out. So he's trimmed the squad accordingly down to 22, 23 senior players, depending on whether you're including the likes of Tyrese Simpson, and just says that he thinks that's a far better number of players to work with. He's very big on making sure everybody feels involved and feels like they've got a chance to be involved. So that was his thinking behind that. Explained that Jay Matete, who there was a fair bit of noise around leading up to the deadline, was a player that the club spoke about but didn't move on. Ultimately felt that with Backinson in the building and Morsey to come back from suspension, Evans hopefully fit again fairly soon, that was an area of the team that they were well covered in. And ultimately the summer is in mind as well. You know, he didn't want to make rash, hasty decisions to go chasing short-term games that kind of then leaves you tied up in knots in the summer and unable to do things that you want to do then. And it's a better window to do business in the summer, isn't it? So that was his summary of the January transfer window.
Okay. And in terms of things that came out, I mean, we broke them down. You did stories yesterday. I guess the talking points are much as they were on Monday. Scott Fraser, first time he's kind of talked about that, and Tyrese Simpson. You've mentioned Matete there. Should we start just out of something a bit different, because we did Fraser in depth and started with that on Monday? Should we start with Tyrese Simpson, Stewie, and what he said about the young striker?
Yeah, I sort of put it to him that ultimately you must be a little bit sort of disappointed that he won't be able to play first team football during the second half of the season. And he sort of said, well, it's not impossible that he features for us. I would argue that those chances are slim when you look at the attacking options with Bond, Norwood, Piggott, Jackson all staying, and then you've got even in a front three, Chaplin and Selina and Aluko sort of capable of playing there as well. But as said, he's back in the building. We get a chance to take a proper look at him, and hopefully this contract situation gets resolved, because he's a player that we like for the future. But clearly, the plan was to recall him, get him to sign that contract, and then send him back out on loan. But they've reached a bit of a deadlock in those negotiations. I can kind of see it from both sides, that I think Tyrese Simpson is probably, I would imagine, sort of judging himself against peers within the Ipswich Town Academy, the likes of Dobra and others, and they'll all know what each other are earning through agents and whatnot. And I'm sure he's probably thinking, well, I've done more in my loan spell than others have. I should be on parity. And the club are probably thinking, well, we've given you your platform in your career to kick on. And, yes, you've done very well, but it's 6 months progress. And I think they're trying to get a bit more of a set structure to the contracts that go out to these younger players. So that's the Mexican standoff there. And I hope that it hasn't left relations too soured between all parties, and it gets resolved, and that Tyrese Simpson's development ultimately isn't held back by not sort of playing week in, week out over these next few weeks. So that's the situation there.
Hutchie, what's your take on the Tyrese situation? Because whatever way you look at it, it's a bad look, isn't it? That we've got a talented young player who was just ripping things up in League Two, really getting valuable experience, enjoying some success in terms of scoring for the first time at senior level in his career. And now he's back at Town. McKenna was talking about him playing for the under-23s, which we all know is not real proper football, as they say. And so Tyrese is losing out, and the club are as well, because he's not getting that experience into him. What do you make of it all?
Yeah, the academy is there for players to develop, isn't it? And part of that development is going out on loan and playing and becoming a man, learning to live alone and progressing in senior football. And for that to be kind of shut on him at such a point is a shame. Obviously, the club have to get the contract situation right. It's something they do have to get right. Whether that really needed him to be recalled from loan to able to do that, we don't know. We don't know the inner workings of it, and I'm sure there are some ups and downs within the academy in terms of contracts and things like that. Obviously, we saw Liam Gibbs leave the club in the summer under a contract situation where he was offered something he thought he was worth more. It didn't happen, and he was sold to Norwich. It is a shame because he was developing really nicely. By all accounts, he has improved so much, so much in those 6 months. From a player who has undoubted physical ability, we've all seen that. But the technical side of things needed work, and by all accounts, that work's happened. What his season looks like from here, I don't know, because as Stu said, that there's 4 central strikers there. We're already talking. McKenna's already talking about how Piggott and Jackson will get their chance at some point. You can't add a 5th one into the mix there with Norwood and Bonne and still dish things out fairly. I'm sure he'll make benches at times, Tyrese, but there is every chance this season in terms of his football is 23's football from now on, and that is a shame. But first and foremost, the contract needs to be sorted out because at present it expires in the summer. So there is an option in there. I'm almost certain of that, but it needs to be sorted. And really, it probably needed to be sorted before he went out on loan, didn't it? That's the tidy, clean way of doing things.
I've seen people say that, but then you don't know. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. No one knew that he was going to go out and be as good as he was. What if you committed to sorting a better contract last summer, and then you think actually 6 months in, he might have done nothing for Swindon, and you think, I wish we hadn't jumped so quickly into that. So that's the counter argument there, isn't it? Ipswich still have got this 12-month extension option on him that they can take, but I don't know how this one pans out really, because they'll take that to protect their asset. But if it's left a bit of a sour taste in his mouth and he ends up sort of seeing out this season in the under-23s, what's his value in the summer? Swindon probably won't hesitate to come back in for him. Really intrigued to see how this one pans out. As I say, I can kind of see it from both parties' point of view, but it shouldn't ultimately have come to a point where Ipswich kind of brought him back on the 28th of January to try and force the issue. I'm not sure that's, like you say, a great look. Let's be honest.
That's what sits uncomfortably, isn't it? And you talk about him being an asset. Now that he's back at the club and not playing, that asset is going to deteriorate in terms of value, you'd think. Rossi, what's your take on Tyrese? You had a really nice chat with a guy down in Radio Wiltshire, didn't you, about how much he has improved, like Hutchie touched on. And he said he has improved massively since he's been at Swindon. And now, back at town, all that kind of for nothing.
Yeah, like, it's, good experience for him, of course, at that 6 months. But it's a bit of a mess. And, in the summer, he's probably one of those players for, go out on loan, get some experience, and probably may not have a future at the club. But he's done all right. In the long term, I don't know if he is going to be the standard that we need, a striker that we need in the future. I know he's still young, he's still raw, but I don't know. I think maybe he has found his level, in my opinion. I know it's a bit harsh. He's still very young, but he's still got a lot of work in the game. It's a bit of a mess. I think, once again, as Stu said, it's a bit, hindsight thing. If we knew he was going to do so well at Swindon, we would have gave him a new contract in the summer, and we wouldn't have had this mess. I'm sure he would have just stayed at Swindon for the rest of the season, or we may have looked for a League One club to him to go out on loan to. But it's just one of those things. It happens in football, and it's a shame he's going to be playing under 23s football.
I don't think it's a complete waste. Obviously, much better to be playing at Swindon or elsewhere, but he will come back and he is training with the first team. He's not going to be sort of training with the young players. He'll be training with the senior players and under McKenna and Martin Pert, which by the sounds of things is a good standard of training. Training with better players every day, working with better strikers. So there are some positives to him being back here. If he's improved technically, come back here and kind of hone it a little bit with better training. But there's a reason these players go out on loan, aren't there? And that's to be right in it, to be playing for 3 points every week and become a man that way. So it is a shame.
And there's also the fact that he's going to be working with Kieran Dyer in the under 23s, who the players seem to have been responding really well to. James Norwood has obviously spoken very warmly about sort of his role. So, he's going into an under 23 setup that's pushing for finishing in the playoffs again. So I know we sort of say that 23s football is not the same, and it's not as men's football. It's not a complete waste, hopefully, these next 6 months if he's kind of dipping in and out of the 23s. And the other thing I'd say is that when people sort of go, just give him the contract, I think we get very caught up in transfer fees in football, but we forget about how much wages are worth. Even if we're talking to pluck a figure out of thin air, $2,000 a week for Tyrese Simpson, if that's what, just give him that and then get him sorted or whatever. That's still, $100,000 a year contract over a 2.5 year contract, which is probably what you'd be talking about at this juncture. That's still £250,000. So you've got to weigh that up. The club will be thinking, are we going to be able to get that? Is he going to be worth 250k plus at some stage for us? And do we see him realistically being better than the sort of strikers that we can now attract to the club with the transfer budget that we now have with the new owners? So it's not always as simple as people think.
Yeah, I know you've just plucked that number out of nowhere, Stu, but if you're talking 250k as a transfer fee, that's kind of top half League One territory for selling, isn't it? Because you're not finding many League Two clubs, I don't think, that are paying 250 grand for a striker. So he's going to have to improve beyond just to use those numbers you've generated from your wonderful brain. Just to use those numbers, he's going to have to improve even beyond kind of Swindon level Tyrese Simpson to be worth that, isn't he? So that's obviously got to be something that's considered.
Okay, interesting chat. Let's hope it all gets resolved soon. Is there any circumstance in which you can see Tyrese playing? Is there any argument for getting him involved?
I think if the season peters away, and there's a chance that happens over the next few weeks, fingers crossed it's not the case, but I think if there's a stage where playoffs is dead, then maybe you start to sort of look to him to get a few minutes in that scenario, but he won't be involved over these next few weeks, that's for sure. McKenna's already said he'll go into the 23s for the short term at the least.
I could maybe argue that if if James Norwood picked up an injury or if Macaulay Bond picked up an injury, kind of obviously that moves him up the pecking order, but stylistically, that bit of physicality, he might jump up kind of the substitute pecking order in that sense, because yes, Joe Pigott brings a level of physicality, definitely, and clearly he's a good finisher who's scored goals at this level, but he doesn't, from what I've seen anyway, bring the energy. And I think Simpson could maybe bring sort of a physical energy from the bench if one of Bonne or Norwood weren't available. Obviously Jackson is similar. He can run. He's very, very fast runs. We've seen him brought on to bring energy, but he doesn't bring the physicality. So maybe there's a scenario where one of those two frontline strikers go down and aren't in the mix, that he could be looked at from the bench. But I think there's a fair old road to go down before we get to that point, I'm afraid.
Rossi's saying play him now, the season's dead.
Yeah, pretty much.
Stewie, let's move on. The main talking point on Monday's show was Scott Fraser, when you got to speak to K-Mac about Scott yesterday. What do you have to say about that? And let's have a little chat about it, shall we?
Well, we speculated on the KOA late night
Lock-in.
deadline day special lock-in. Thank you. I was searching for some alliteration there. That Scott Fraser potentially sort of pushing for this move and being unhappy might have been a part of it, and that has now been cleared up emphatically from Mr. McKenna, who says that he was desperate to leave. He hadn't settled personally or footballing wise, and he wanted to go somewhere and be quote unquote the main man. So I think that sort of we talked about that being a divisive transfer amongst Ipswich Town fans. I think maybe some may be understanding that one a little bit more now they've heard those comments.
And reading what Steve Gallen had to say, Charlton's director of football, they've been after Fraser for 2 years, and the way they've talked about him is he is going to be a key part of that puzzle. If he wants to be the main man somewhere, it sounds like he's going to be that at Charlton, Hutchie.
Yeah, that's what we were saying on Monday, weren't we? I look at Charlton and the way they set up, and as I said before, I see Johnny Jackson, that he the manager, that in terms of the way that those two played, they play a central midfield three. And as much as we talk about Scott Fraser being a number 10 and a central attacker, he can play there, but so much of what he's done in the past has come off the left of kind of a midfield three, where he can roll out in kind of American football speak, can kind of roll out of the pocket and then attack from there. He fits the puzzle perfectly at Charlton. He didn't fit the puzzle at Ipswich, and they've put the piece back in the right box. It seems to me. I was happy. I was happy with it on Monday. I was quite content with the deal that they did on Monday, and then just hearing McKenna explain it quite so clearly and plainly, I think they've done exactly the right thing for everybody in this situation. But I do think he could go to Charlton and do very well. So I think we're this isn't the last time we'll discuss Scott Fraser and the merits of whether he should have been allowed to move on or not.
Rossi, you were very much in the kind of this is going to bite us on the butt camp on Monday. Hearing that he wasn't happy at Town though, and hadn't settled and wanted to move on, that's got to change your opinion, hasn't it? I mean, if you've got a player who's not happy and you have a chance to at least make your money back on him and move him on, that's the right thing to do, isn't it, or not?
Yeah, so that's Scott. Who's Scott Fraser? Ryan Fraser. I still think it's a shame it hasn't worked out, but yeah, he's unhappy. And as Andy very well said, he is going to fit that puzzle at Charlton. That piece that they needed in that midfield, and for us, he just doesn't fit, unfortunately. I still think it could bite us on the butt in the long term, but we've got other players who can fit that now. But yeah, it's a shame it hasn't worked out. But yeah, so that's Scott.
He just hasn't. He hasn't. As much as I do think it is a shame, because clearly he's a really good football player, but he hasn't. While accepting he's been played out of position, he hasn't shown enough to merit the team being built for him.
Yeah.
And a role made for him. So I think some of it has to be on Scott himself. Yes, he wasn't. He was played wide on the left. He was played on the right. We didn't see him in his favoured roles, but when he did play there, he was still able to have the football and was still able to to do some things, and he didn't show enough to build a team around him and make him the main man. There's no question that he should have been the main man at Ipswich Town. Of course, he shouldn't. There are too many leading men here to have that, and he didn't put his hand up to be that main man. So I really think, all in all, the right call for everyone.
My one slight reservation is that we're talking about having plenty of players that can play in that position, but Salina's loan expires in the summer. Sonny Aluko, soon to be 33, 34, I think 33. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Ross is checking. He's out of contract in the summer. The midfield options are obviously Atkinson's loan will be out, and Carroll's contract is up. So what have we got? That's 6 fingers, Ross.
It's 3-3.
Okay.
He's 33 this month.
He's 33. Okay. So, sort of we talk about sort of planning for the medium term. Doors could have opened for him in the summer, but he clearly was... it was, as I said, it was heading down a certain pathway. A direction of travel was set, and sometimes you just have to accept that. But there'll be business that needs to be done in the summer in multiple positions. That's for sure.
33 obviously means that he's well over Rossi's cut-off point. Out the door, Aluko. Useless, old man. Get rid. Stewie, is there anything else to talk about from the press conference? I'd like to know, actually, in terms of press conferences. You're a veteran of many press conferences over the years. How are they running with Kieran? Are they any different? Do you feel like you're getting more out of Kieran than you maybe are from other managers? Can you talk about that a little bit?
The run time is longer. We're getting sort of half an hour plus, which by sort of comparison, I guess, to sort of Paul Cook ones were sort of 20 minutes, and you got the feeling that Paul was sort of half out of his seat and trying to edge out of the door towards the end of these. We're getting far longer answers, far more fulsome answers from Kieran McKenna. I mean, for example, we'll get onto Gillingham in a minute, but previous managers, Paul Cook, others would be, it's not about the opposition. It's about us, despite the fact that if you spoke about sort of transfers or anything that was in the least bit sort of controversial, they'd sort of say, we've got a game on Saturday, haven't we? You're going to ask me about Gillingham? And then you'd ask about Gillingham and they'd say, well, it's not about Gillingham, it's about us. But with Kieran McKenna, he sat there and sort of broke down Gillingham. He talked about sort of them, they played 4 at the back, but they've now switched to 3 at the back, and they were man-to-man, and now they've gone zonal and went into like real sort of tactical depth about the opposition, and just even the way that he dealt with the Fraser stuff and others just really explains his thinking. And we talked about him being someone that sort of shows his working, and that is what he's doing, and I'm really enjoying it, and I'm sure that the fans are as well.
Hutchie, in your long and lengthy journalistic career, who's been the best manager? This is a bit of an aside in terms of press conferences you've really enjoyed talking to. Has there been any, or are they always a bit of a kind of necessary ordeal, a dance that neither partner really wants to be doing?
No, without a shadow of a doubt, the best manager I've ever dealt with for that was Paolo Di Canio.
Yes.
Who also explained his thinking, but in a very different way to Kieran McKenna. Like, there were different voices. He played different characters. He kind of played the angel and devil in his own mind in a conversation. Transcribing it, absolute nightmare, which is the worst part. The worst part of this job is transcribing interviews and writing up quotes. He was an absolute nightmare because he just went off on so many different tangents and so many. Like, there was once he was pretending to drive he was talking that the analogy was supposed to be, I want all the players on my bus. I'm the bus driver, and I want all of these players to come with me on the journey. But he did the noise when the bus stops and the door opened, like, and get on the bus. And it just got complete. You couldn't transcribe it, and you couldn't with the medium of kind of print and newspapers, which was much more newspaper based then. You couldn't kind of get over quite how insane he was. But they were exceptional, those press conferences. Like, he once came in, I remember once he came in with a prepared statement because he wanted to slag off Lou Macari. So he just brought it in on a statement and read it out, which none of it made any sense, so we didn't run it. But yeah, he was he was something special. There have been some rubbish ones along the way though, as well. But he will. I doubt he'll ever be surpassed in my rankings.
There are things that I want to do when we have time, maybe in the summer. One is more on Paolo Di Canio, because I think that people will be fascinated to hear about that period. I know it's not Ipswich Town related, but he's a bit of a leg end all round, isn't he, in football? And I'd imagine covering a side with him managing it would be something of a journey. And also your top kits. I know people have asked, Nigel's asked in the mailbag bit about your favourite kits. I want to do that properly at some point, so we're not going to tackle that today. Those are things I want to do in the summer. Stewie, people will no doubt be screaming at their video or audio, however they're consuming this. Say, ask Stewie which Town managers he enjoyed the most in terms of press conferences. So I'll do that before we get onto mailbag.
In an odd way, the end of days Mick McCarthy era was sort of professionally challenging and enjoyable in equal measure. Those were in the days where the press conferences were kind of broadcast live via Facebook and whatnot, and you had to be prepared for those. I think Mick really sharpened me up as an interviewer. You put a word out of line, and Mick would be on it. So yeah, from a professional sense, I don't know if enjoy is the right word, but
mate, I remember those days. Better. The way, like, when, because they were all done in person as well, weren't they? And you left the office, and like other members of staff were like, "Good luck, Stu."
Yeah,
good luck, Stu.
like going a little bit on the front line.
Yeah, a little bit on the shoulders for you. You got greeted at the door sometimes on the way back in after by certain other members of staff.
They could have been
none of us.
No, they could have been pay-per-view events, though, couldn't they? Back in the day, that's what people were watching it for. It was the kind of preamble, and then Watson comes on. Mick grabs a water bottle and throttles it straight away, and then the show begins. It was tremendous, and yeah,
I think from sort of other managers, Paul Jewell, in a way, sometimes was great because you didn't have to work too hard for him to just suddenly give you something completely out of nowhere. Like in pre-season, he would just tell you every player, "Yeah, we've made a bid for Jonathan Woodgate and Matthew Upson, and we're speaking to so-and-so," and he would just tell you everything on that front. And then, I remember after they lost somewhere, I think it's up at Hull, and he was sort of on the edge at that stage, and it was a throwaway question at the end, are you thinking about your future? And just, yeah, I've got to go and think about that. And just, okay.
The answer is never yes.
Yeah, that's not what you say. Yeah.
But yeah, Paul was hard work at times as well. We could. This is another podcast in itself, I'm sure.
100%. Friends, let's move on to something. One of the things I enjoyed most about the tyrannical reign of Kim Jong-Stew in the host chair was the return of mailbag. It was a real trip down memory lane, a bit of retro nostalgia, a right throwback. And so I want to try and incorporate a bit more going forward. So I'm going to do that today. Obviously, Hutchie, when Stu was in charge, you were three-line whipped and rather bullied, I would say, into singing the jingle. Felt a bit uncomfortable listening-wise. So I would invite you now, friend, if you fancy it, could you please get those dulcet tones out and sing the mailbag jingle?
I can't comment on the Stu incident anymore because it's been sent to HR, that side of things. But
just sing the fucking jingle.
Mailbag. It's time for Mark, Andy, Stu, and Ross to dip into the mailbag.
Do. I'd just like to apologise to listeners who were traumatised by that outburst from Watson. Good Lord, Stewie, we're seeing a different side to you, aren't we, here? Right, we've had loads of questions, as you'd expect. We're not going to have time to do all of them, so we're going to do a mixture, maybe 10, 5 non-football, 5 football. Let's start with football. There's been a few questions. There were a few questions about Tyree Simpson. Obviously, we've already talked about that. Ben Moore and FPL Tractor asked about that. There's been a couple of other questions about Macaulay Bond, so let's do those. Harvey Davis. Stewie, Harvey Davis.
Friend of the show. Number 3.
4.
Possibly.
Don't know.
Sweet Welsh Prince. That I appreciate the Welsh touch as well to that, Stewie. Harvey Davis says, if Bond's goal-scoring record remains pretty much the same for the rest of the season, despite what he offers when he's not scoring, will we be having a conversation about whether to sign him on a permanent, or has he shown enough already for it to be a no-brainer? Discuss. Rossi, I'm going to start with you because you've not had a chance to say much so far. Macaulay Bonne is your boy, but put that aside. Be objective here. If Bonne continues to struggle to score for the rest of the season, is there an argument around trying to sign him permanently?
I'm very much on the fence here. I think right now, Town fans will want him because he's a Blue, he's one of our own and all that, but he hasn't really done it, has he? The last 10, 15 games. I'm sure the fee will be maybe lower now, but QPR, if they know Ipswich Town want them, of course they're going to raise the fee up more and more. We are in League One next season. Just going to put that out there again. So maybe it is worth signing him permanently. But for the long term in the Championship, if we are ever there, hopefully one day again. I don't think he's going to be the man to lead the line. But yeah, why not? Let's sign him up. It's a nice little fairy tale signing him permanently. Got Walton permanently. Let's get Macaulay Bonne permanently.
I love how Ross's loyalty flakes away so very quickly. His boys just gets ditched within seconds. We had it before with Guion, was dead to you so very quickly. Macaulay the same.
Reece Curtis asked a similar question. So, Stu or Hutchie, do you want to take on the Bonne scenario?
In short, I think was the question: is it a no-brainer to sign him? I don't think we're in no-brainer territory. It will be there's a decision to be made there. Was it 1 in 15? I was just having a look at his
1 in 15
stats now. It will come down to, I think it's something that I think they'll still like to do, but it will have to be at the right deal. So we'll see.
There's other moving parts as well. Obviously, James Norwood's a moving part in it all, in his contract. I don't know if you keep both. I don't know. I would still sign Macaulay Bonne, but at the right deal. But I'd also quite like him not to be signed as kind of the Scott Fraser style main man. Have Macaulay Bonne as maybe someone comes in above Macaulay Bonne in the pecking order, and Macaulay Bonne comes an excellent sort of rotational striker. Who knows? But
how does Macaulay Bonne feel about that though? If that's the vibe that he's getting going into the summer, that's a real test of his love of the badge, which is unquestionable, but also his love of playing football, and someone that's had spells where he was very frustrated at Charlton and QPR for not getting as much game time as he wants. He's had a taste of it again now. If he's getting the feeling that there's a main man coming in ahead of him that McKenna really likes, then it might not appeal as much to him as well. So
this is a really difficult one, isn't it? Because there's not normally this emotion involved in these transfers. It's some different factors in the mix that they're all going to have to work through in the summer.
Do you think if Town are still in League One next season, which is looking like they probably will be, is that going to be a big impact? Because obviously at the moment, Macaulay Bonne is with a Championship side. As a player, you'd expect him to want to play at the highest level. Does that tip the balance as well, do you think?
I still think they could sign him in League. Yeah. I think they could sign him in League One. I really do. I don't think there are Championship clubs going to be falling over. We're talking about if the goal scoring record continues as it is, right? Which means he'll score. Which means he might score 1 goal between now and the end of the season. I think he will score more goals than that. But I don't think there's going to be Championship clubs absolutely gagging for him. I think they could sign him in League One, but as we've just discussed, there are plenty of other moving parts, factors, emotions, opinions, all in there. So I think it's what was once a cut and dried splash the cash deal is not that no brainer anymore.
Okay, let's move on. Mullet, my fighty friend Mullet, asked a kind of behind the scenes question, which I like. So, Stewie, I'll put this one to you. How has your job changed since the takeover? Is there a marked difference in the way things are done at Town now, as far as you're concerned? Obviously, we talked a little bit there about the press conference, but on a wider sphere, does it feel different to the kind of Evans era from your point of view?
There's obviously been more transparency from the club, sort of dealing with the upper ends of the club. We've obviously had several of the owners doing interviews, just being visible. Mark Ashton has been far more contactable and easier to deal with than or accessible, I should say, than obviously the sort of during the Evans era. So that side of things changed, but the rest of the job hasn't altered a huge amount. Obviously, just having a few more, well, just having a lot more to report on in general the last year from the takeover onwards with all of the transfers and everything. We talked about sort of transfer deadline day normally being a damp squib, and we've had a couple of very exciting transfer windows now, so that gives us more content to work with. But much of the job is still the same, I would say, Andy, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's just different people in different roles who are maybe a bit more accessible, a bit more open, which comes, I guess, from ownership, and they all spoke about the club needing to be that way. And like, for example, there's a new head of media in there. An awful lot hasn't changed, but there's really good dialogue there, and an openness, willing to talk about things. It's just new people with a few new ideas, but nothing that's changed dramatically, I wouldn't say.
And Marcus owns a pug, doesn't he? So he's all right by me.
He has got he's got a lovely little dog. Marcus Nash is the new head of media. I've bumped into him walking the dog late at night. He's a lovely little dog. So you like him for that, don't you?
I mean, a pug is obviously on the bulldog scale of breed. Any kind of flat-faced bull breed dog's all right by me, and I like pugs. Right then, I'm going to ask you all.
Better.
Exactly. I'm going to ask you all the next question because it's a good one. I'm going to start with you, Rossi. Christopher Day, in terms of a peek behind the curtain sort of thing. Out of all the games you've been to reporting as a journalist, photojournalist, Rossi, in your case, which one do you wish you could have been on the terraces with the fans for rather than behind laptops or a camera?
Wow, there's not been many, to be honest. Paul Lambert, Paul Cook.
Yeah.
Possibly. I think, the Portsmouth game, although I was pretty much with the fans anyway, even the Wickham game, so they don't actually count. I was sort of there anyway. To be fair, there's not many, to be honest. I have to admit, it's just been.
You do still get a taste of being with the fans, don't you? Because you're right next to them. That's your kind of your role is to capture the fans' emotion during the game. A bit different for you boys. Obviously, you're up on press row with your laptop and your fingers freezing, stretching them out, and all that. Hutchie, obviously, you've covered more than just Ipswich Town. I know Stu's covered Colchester as well. Is there a game, not necessarily Ipswich Town, a game that sticks out for you? You think, I wish I was here as a paying punter.
Late goals are always when I kind of have that feeling. Maybe Macaulay Bond's equaliser against Morecambe on the opening day. That in stoppage time there, it's all about late goals. Tell you what though, MK Dons in a week or so's time with 7,000 away fans at a game is going to be because we'll be right down the other end from that as well, from where the away fans are. That's one I'd kind of maybe slap the press bench right in the middle of 7,000 Ipswich fans rather than a couple of empty blocks of MK Dons seating. But whenever there's a late goal, late winner, late equaliser, that's when I wish I was in the stands and not having to write about it.
Would you actually, famously a flatline, not particularly excitable individual, does Hutchie go much more than a fist pump when you celebrate, or do you really give it some?
Can't remember. There's no, I can't remember. I haven't been to a football match where I tell you what, I did go. I went to watch in my bid to start enjoying some football. I've got no allegiance to Manchester United, but I went to watch Man United play Atalanta in the Champions League earlier this season, and Ronaldo scored a stoppage time winner. I got quite excited by that because that was just in the moment and fun.
This is the first
gave it a little Tim Henman.
Yes.
Tiger Tim, the worst, least applicable nickname.
So that was good.
Sports. Mate, why is this the first I've heard of this? You're going to watch Man United and seeing Ronaldo score. You've never mentioned this to me.
Wow, just hidden gems in it, secrets.
Turns out we're not really mates, doesn't it? Stewie,
didn't mention it. I've also been to watch West Ham play Leicester. If you're interested, they won 4-1 and went top of the league. I sang "I'm Forever Blowing Bubbles" with my friend Joe.
Nice. Stewie, you've got a more than a decade under your belt of watching Town. You covered Colchester before that. Are there any games that stand out that you'd have liked to be on the terraces for?
As Andy says, last minute winners. I think Chaplow at Watford, Noel Hunt at Charlton. They would have been moments that you'd have liked to have been in the away end. I think there are times where I see people sort of, especially the London games, sort of maybe travelling after work, having a few beers and thinking, yeah, I wouldn't mind sort of enjoying it like this. Fulham, when you see there was some great boat parties.
Yeah.
I would see this sort of boat noise and people sliding along the deck covered in beer and stuff, and thinking that looks quite fun, rather than sort of walking in with my press pass. But Old Trafford, those sort of big games where, you know, there's not been many, but going to Old Trafford as a supporter and those sort of occasions as well. So yeah, it would be nice. I think Andy and I talk about it quite a lot. It's important for us to kind of keep sort of fresh as fans, as people who enjoy the game as well as it being work as well. So yeah.
I want to see Watson on the party boat. We need a KOA behind the scenes video. Watson doing the beer slide on that party boat at Fulham at some point. I'd fully endorse that as your pre-game as well. You then have to cover the game.
Okay.
Right then, back to football. Richard Lee, how many points do you think ITFC will have to get to sixth or above? And he also says, as it's Stu's turn now for the lucky charm, what's he going to go for? Or is it up to Andy? So in terms of points total, Hutchie, I think we speculated before, haven't we? Is it 75? We've kind of
over
said
10
roughly.
years. Over 10 years on average, 73 should nick you sixth.
73. Okay.
Yeah. But I've got a feeling it might be a bit more than that this year. It's all a bit spread out up there. I think they might need in excess of that. But that's just for sixth. That's just to sneak sixth place and get into the playoffs. So you'd think 75, 76 is what they'll need.
So
What they're on at the moment?
2
41?
points a game now over the last 17, which is obviously what McKenna's done so far, with four wins, 2 defeats from 6. It's an average of 2 points a game. So they need to replicate what has already been a very good run of form. They need to replicate that over 17 more now. Big ask.
Yeah, I'd also argue that because of the way that things look at the top, I think those wins would have to come in some of the right games as well, because they've obviously got a fair amount of those up there.
Yeah,
in the battle to sixth still to play. They could do with winning some of the right ones as well as winning ones like this weekend as well.
Well, MK Dons away is obviously massive, isn't it? They're up there, and then I look at that run at the back end of March. Portsmouth, Oxford, Plymouth in successive games, and they're all teams that are kind of in that little battle for 5th, 6th spot. So that they need to be sort of in the hunt still come the end of March, and then we'll see what happens.
Stu, are you going to take the lucky thing mantle on? Have you got something you're going to include?
We can't force this.
I don't think the trainer streak has ended. As I say, I think Andy didn't deploy them correctly last weekend.
I think there's definitely an argument there, and I assume would you be deploying them this weekend, Hutchie? Just so we can see.
Not out of duty, but they are my shoes. Like
your go-to.
This was no gimmick. I bought those shoes and wore them because I like them. They are my shoes. They have not been replaced. But I think they've done their job. It's time to let's not focus on them anymore. Let's move on. Let the team do the business now.
I just feel like we've been left with some doubts. I don't think there's been a natural closure to this.
I also want to know when the Monsters Inc. ones are going to come out, because you've got to have them big game.
Well, I'll wear them on next time we see each other, not over a laptop. I'll wear the Monsters Inc. ones, and you can tell me what you think. Stu, on your point there, the American football fans amongst us will have seen Tom Brady retire this week on the back of a very, very good performance, on the back of a season where he could have been the MVP of the NFL. Had he carried on and fallen off a cliff and his talents diminished, though Tom Brady would not be remembered in the way that he is. Let the shoes retire at their own time when they're ready at the peak of their powers.
They haven't gone out on a high, have they? That's the point.
They've gone out on their terms.
Okay.
Stu, very quickly, another peek behind the curtain question. We can take this one very quickly. Jacob Moran says, what's Stuart Watson's cover photo about? It's always baffled me. On Twitter, you've got a very arty cover photo, which is you kind of doing what looks like a bicycle kick, silhouetted against the sun. Just very quickly clear that up.
That's me. doing a bicycle kick on the beach down in Cornwall. I just thought it was a nice arty picture, and it fitted the sort of stretched landscape size. That's it. There's nothing more behind it, and I've never changed it. Like my profile picture has never changed.
I thought it was during a special moment in your life. Was that not around when you got married, or no? Have I made that up?
Yeah, well, it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Memory.
Excellent memory. Right then, James Houston wants to know what's everyone's highlight from their own footballing or sporting careers. Rossi, we know that you once were better than Macaulay Bonne as a 14-year-old, scored 25 goals, and that's where your season peaked, your football life peaked. Is that going to be the highlight of your sporting career, such as it is?
Probably, yeah. Age 14, 25 goals in a season. We won the league and cup, so league and cup double. And then, yeah, after that, pretty much shit, to be fair. Girls, drink and all that.
It's ruined many a good footballer. Probably not from the age of 14, though.
No.
Hutchie, your sporting career, where did that peak?
Any of you ever been world ranked at a sport?
No.
Competed in a world championship?
No,
right.
This is very good.
I finished 57th in the World Crazy Golf Championship, which world ranking, world championship level, elite sport, all achieved using a putter borrowed from the hut, which was very much at odds with the rest of the professionals' approach to the big tournament. So that's me.
That is pretty impressive, to be fair.
Thanks very much.
Any of us can say we've been a world ranked in any sport. Again, another one for the Hutchie archives when we have this Hutchie special. Stewie, you were a footballer of note. Where did your career peak?
I don't know where you've got this idea from. On a semi-serious note, probably going from mid-Essex Division 5 with a team of my mates who started up as a reserve side for Braintree and Bocking. We went all the way up through the divisions, all the way up to Division 1. We won a cup final as well, played on Malden's pitch. That was good fun before I started this gig. Doing stuff like that with your mates is the best. I just remember the dressing room banter, and just that's the thing I miss most about playing football, as much as actually playing the game. More recently would probably have been my crossfield volley over in Germany when we played in that pre-season staff game that had Luke Chambers and co purring on the sidelines.
That day was famously a disappointment for Ross, wasn't it? Do you remember? He came off really upset because he didn't get to play with the first team.
It was his birthday as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
We said to him afterwards, "Amazing, mate. On your birthday, you've just played football in front of the Ipswich Town squad." He went, "Yeah, would have been better if we was with the first team." I don't know if he thought he was going to get a contract or something.
I did once score 25 goals in a season.
And you wait, in 2 years' time, Ipswich are going to sign this striker called Macaulay Bonne. I was better than him at 14.
I'm also somewhat maybe surprised, boys, that neither of you mentioned playing at Portman Road as you did in that game. And Hutchie got Twisted Blood, trademark Stuart Watson, from one of the footy freestylers I remember. That was pretty cool, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, I also dispossessed one of the biggest names in The Only Way is Essex as well. So
yeah,
ups and downs. I've got the shirt from that game on my wall with a nice picture of me in that. Me, Stu, and Dan Palfrey, who works at the football club, just walking off the pitch.
Nice. Me personally, I would say having a scrap under the arches in the East End, a famous gym called the KO Gym in London, which is one of the most famous Muay Thai gyms in the country. Fighting in the East End, good. Cornering a friend at the O2, that was good. And from a kind of more youthful side of things, basketball was my sport when I was a kid, and playing university basketball at Loughborough against Loughborough, who everyone knows Loughborough are an elite university sporting wise. That was a hell of an experience because they were unbelievable.
Who did you corner at the O2? Did you have to hold the spit bucket?
I held the bag of ice.
Nice.
On the back of his neck. His friend's name was Paul. And
did he win?
No, he lost, unfortunately. But it was a good experience, and one that not many people can say they've done. And there's anyway, I'm not going to get too deep into it, but pretty special thing. Right then, we've got 3 more questions, boys. 1 football, 2 non-football. Which do you want first?
Non-football, always.
Non-football. Right then, Mark Beck, member of the KOA Fan Social Posse. I'm going to come to Rossi here first, because I reckon he might have a view on this. Your choice is final, and the other will no longer exist. Pack of donuts, custard or jam. Your move.
Jam. I don't mind custard. I think custard's more for, desserts. I think, I don't know, in donuts, not for me. But so strawberry jam, whatever.
Strawberry jam. Watson.
Controversially, I'm not bothered about the donuts. They can all go. I
Get rid of
prefer a
donuts.
muffin, a cookie, a biscuit. Just think donuts. I'm going to say it. I think they're overrated. I think they're a bit stodgy. I always feel a bit sort of disappointed in myself after I've just finished a donut. So I can't argue either cause.
Okay, donuts are gone. Hutchie, what do you reckon?
There's nothing to talk about now. He's just got rid of them. Jam all the way. I would throw another contender into the mix though. When we were in Japan,
Here we go.
I bought a curry donut.
What?
Which had like a sweet kind of curry filling to it. It was amazing.
That sounds like an absolute disgrace.
Oh, mate, it was amazing. It was really, really nice. But otherwise, raspberry jam.
Yeah, I'd go raspberry jam. I'd also really want to try one day. You see in America where they have burgers where they use donuts as the bun.
Is that good?
I think it would be. I think it'd work on the same principle as the old maple syrup and bacon sort of vibe. The sweet and the slightly salty and savoury. I'm here for it. I'll have a go at it. Right then, one more football question, and then we'll finish with what I think is one of the best questions you've ever been asked. View from the U2, Matt Bono, the man with about 13 different names, also a member of the KOA Fan Social Posse. He says, good moaning. As a prospect of making the top 6 is slowly slipping away, is there a moment from earlier on in the campaign which you think might have proved pivotal in defining our season? Stewie.
It'd have to come in those first 8 games. Maybe Macaulay Bonne not missing that sitter at Cheltenham off the top of my head. Fraser's goal penalty being scored at Burton. I would say in those 2 games, if either of those sort of moments had turned the other way, then a different direction of travel may have happened.
Hutchie, any to throw into the mix?
Nothing beyond that. It all goes everything we talk about every week on this podcast is goes back to that start to the season. If they'd started that, even just an average start to the season, this would all be so different right now. So it's got to be moments in there. It's got Fraser's penalty miss. It's got to be Macaulay Bonne not just missing that chance, but then the way that they conceded the 2 second half goals at Cheltenham, losing the lead twice at home to an MK Dons team that's now above them. Yeah, it all goes back to the start.
Even letting a 2-goal lead slip against Wimbledon at home towards the end of that run, there were chances to kind of rectify those moments that we've just talked about, and it didn't happen as well. So 2-goal lead slipped at Cambridge as well. There's plenty you can go back to.
Too many, if anything. Right then, final question of mailbag, and I have enjoyed this trip down memory lane, and as I say, we will return to it. This might be the best question I think we've ever had on mailbag. Jack wants to know, you have to fight Mike Tyson. He's anywhere between the ages of 1 to 18. And if you win, you get £1 million for each year that he's been alive. What age do you pick? This is a brilliant question, right? Mike Tyson. So you pick an age for Mike Tyson. Bear in mind, Mike Tyson started boxing when he was 13. He was basically a killer from the age of 13 onwards. He was knocking people out, knocking grown men out from that age in sparring, knocking people out for fun in the Junior Olympics, turned pro when he was 18 and won the world title when he was 21. Mike Tyson was essentially fully grown when he was 13 as well. He was, what he is now, 5'10" and 220 pounds of muscle. So I reckon it's up to you how you answer this, boys. But I would say anywhere from the age of 13 onwards, Mike Tyson would kill all of us inside a round. If we're talking purely boxing, which I suppose we have to be in terms of a fight. Stewie, you're a hard nut. When would you Where would you like?
He's not. He's really not. He's not a world-class football player. He's not a hard nut. You've completely pegged this man wrong.
When would you like to beat up Mike Tyson? What age would you pick?
I'm not going to be greedy. It's a lot of money on the table here. 8. I'll just give an 8-year-old Mike Tyson a real pasting, take my £8 million and go. I mean, you don't want to go younger either, because I'm not going to beat up a toddler. That's that's not going to happen. I mean, I suppose decking an 8-year-old is marginally better, but by that point, people know that Mike Tyson, the sort of character he is. So I think I'd be given a bit of leeway. So 8 is my answer.
Okay, 8-year-old Mike Tyson. Rossi, you famously told us on that night out in London you're a right scrapper. We'll have a go with anyone who they try and take your phone.
Yeah, there's scrapping.
Yeah.
And then
They're actually fighting.
Yeah. What age would you take on Mike Tyson?
I just want £1 million, so 1 year's age. Yeah.
Just pick him up and kick him over a fence.
Yeah, pretty much. So,
Dear, oh dear, there we go. Playing it very safe there.
Yeah.
Hutchie?
I had 6 in my head. It's just, again, I'm not, the cash isn't the issue. There's a hard line in the sand that they must be a primary school child at least before I do this. I'm not doing it to a nursery child. I've got a nephew who is about to turn 6, and I could definitely beat him up. So I wouldn't. I love him. But Mike Tyson, don't even know the lad. I'd have him in and out at 6. Are you going to say 13, Mark?
No, God, good Lord, no.
You've got to go higher though.
You've got to be the highest.
I think any time from around 10 onwards is a bit of a risk, I've got to be honest. Because he was not your average child. Clearly can punch phenomenally hard. And that's something you don't learn. You just have naturally. So
you could take a 10-year-old Mike Tyson.
I'm not saying I could, to be honest. I mean, clearly, it depends what sort of fight it is. Is it an MMA fight? Is it a kickboxing Muay Thai fight? Is it just a straight fight? As I say, I think any time from 12, 13 onwards, that would be suicide. So I'd probably say 10. Just to reflect, gents, we are currently getting paid to talk about what age we'd beat up a child at.
But we would all like to make it very clear that we wouldn't do that.
Of course, absolutely. It's not to be encouraged. Right then, friends, let's move on, shall we, to Gillingham. And thanks for mailbag this week. I enjoyed it, especially that last question. Gillingham this weekend. Rossi, I'm going to come to you. Up until recently, Gillingham have been absolute whipping boys, a bit like me fighting a 13-year-old Mike Tyson. You spoke to Gills in the Blood, the podcast this week, didn't you, to get a little insight? They've got a former Ipswich Town managerial candidate now in charge, Neil Harris. He's had an instant impact. They've actually won a game. Give us a little insight then into what you were told from your friend over at Gillingham.
Well, they finally won a game of football, the first time since, I think, October, and they've won 4 games all season. So I think they're a little bit happier. I think it's a good appointment for Gillingham. I think a lot of Gillingham fans are happy with Neil Harris getting the point. There's going to be a few going, Neil Harris, not very exciting. But they're playing a different system, as Stu said earlier. It will be a different game, of course, from the game at Gillingham. I'm sure we won't be, hopefully we can be 3-0 up inside 15 minutes, but I don't think that will be the case in this one. He says they seems more organised. Of course, Carl Dempsey's left now. He's joined Bolton. They brought in Ben Thompson from Millwall, but apparently Carl Dempsey hasn't been at it this season. They've had injuries. Dean Oliver last year was their go-to striker. He's been in and out of injuries. His wife had a baby, so he's really been in and out. But he just said they seem more organised, a bit more confidence. They know it's not going to be easy going to Portman Road, but it will be a different side. They got a different goalie in goal, got a new defender, so it should be a different game. But no, I think a little bit more happy at Gillingham after finally winning a game.
Stewie, is there a danger going into this game that Town are going to be too confident? There's going to be certainly the fans are going to expect quite a big win, given what happened before and Gillingham's form generally before Harris has come in.
Yeah, I think dealing with expectation is going to be a real sort of test of character. There's no getting away from it. I think the majority of people who turn up at Portman Road will be expecting and demanding a win. Ipswich need to win games of football, and they've beaten Gillingham 4-0 not that long ago. Gillingham conceded 7 goals at home to Oxford last weekend. Kieran McKenna was quick to stress that neither of those results have, well, zero relevance, he says, because a lot has changed since last weekend, let alone back at the start of January. But I'd argue there is still some relevance. I know you get the new manager bounce. I think Neil Harris is a very good appointment for a club in their position. But it's still, a couple of signings aside, it's still the bulk of those players that, as Ross says, have won 4 games all season, and 3 of those have been against teams in the relegation zone. Ipswich won't lose that game. I'll stick my neck very firmly on the line there. It's just whether Gillingham can be organised and battling enough to kind of scrap their way to a point, and whether Ipswich's patience and quality ultimately shows. I think it will.
Hutchie, your thoughts?
I think Gillingham should be absolutely ecstatic to have somebody like Neil Harris as their manager. I'm a bit perplexed as to why he's taken that job. I think clearly he wanted the Ipswich job. He was someone that was interviewed for that, but I would be I'm a little bit surprised he's taken this. But yeah, these wins are kind of non-negotiable, really. If we're talking about genuinely making the playoffs, we need to see Ipswich take 4 points out of every 6 that they play for. And you're playing teams like Gillingham and Doncaster back to back. It's getting to the point where they're kind of non-negotiable. You need to find a way. I don't think they'll blow Gillingham away. I don't think it's going to be a repeat of the previous game. And I think that's where McKenna's coming from in terms of the zero relevance of it. But it's largely the same players. There is a relevance. I don't think they'll blow them away, but I do think they'll get the win, and they do need to do that because there's some harder games down the road, and if you don't win this game, then you're putting so much pressure on having to win at MK Dons. I'd argue you probably have to win at MK Dons anyway, but you could leave there with a point and still be kind of happy with where you're at if you've taken 6 points from these 2.
I think, the new manager bounce thing, I think it's good that Ipswich are playing them in their second game. I think back to like when Mick McCarthy came in at Ipswich, and Ipswich went and ground out a 1-0 win at Birmingham. And I think the next game they got absolutely done by, was it Palace the next game, 5-0? Or there was a Leicester 6-1 in there. But the second game was a real back down to earth. And I think adrenaline can kind of get you through. And it's one thing sort of protecting a 1-0 lead against Crewe at home. It's another thing coming to Portman Road on Saturday, and if Ipswich can get an early goal, I think any concerns about this game will kind of dissipate quite quickly. So hopefully they can do that.
Rossi, did your friend at Gills in the Blood highlight any players that Town fans should be on the lookout for? Obviously, go and watch that video if you've not, because it's always a good watch to meet the opposition. But gives a little insight.
Not really. I think they're just a team lacking confidence. I think they're all going to try to impress their new manager. I know Stuart O'Keefe, who was at Town's academy, is now their captain. So he will be leading Gillingham out. I'm sure he'll be wanting to, I won't say prove a point, because he left us many years ago, and he's played in the Championship. But he'll be one. I think Ben Thompson, of course, he just signed from Millwall. I'm sure he'll be making his debut. They've got Connor Masterson, I think his name is, probably completely butchered that completely.
Masterson, yeah.
That's the one. Of course, he was at Cambridge earlier in the season. He's now signed permanently. And as I said, they've got a new goalie, or they'll be playing someone else in goal, that, because Cummings has gone to MK Dons, who was at Chelsea. So, and I think Mustafa Carriel, of course, formerly at Town, unfortunately came off injured in the Crewe game, so he probably won't feature. But
it's a really bad head injury, I think.
Yeah.
Is it?
Sounds it.
So yeah, not good for him. Wish him all the best. But as I said, Vadine Oliver will be maybe their up front. But you just never know when these sort of teams come to Town. They could just throw out anything.
It's the dealing without Sam Morsey issue again for Ipswich, isn't it? It's almost like, we missed him massively at Hillsborough, but we'll be fine without him against Gillingham and Doncaster. But it's not a given. I think he changes the dynamic of the side massively when he's in it, and when he's not in it. Lee Evans is going to be a very late fitness call by the sounds of things. So if it is 2 out of Backinson, Carroll, El Mazzuni, have Ipswich got the sort of the necessary sort of grit and midfield drive and just balance in midfield to kind of get through these games?
Interesting. Hutchie, you know where we've got to go now? We talk about a game that Town are about to play.
Yeah.
Get that money out, boy.
Yeah.
You've just won £6 million off beating up 6-year-old Mike Tyson, so you can stick that in the pot.
Yeah.
Where are we going with this, and how much is in the pot? How are we doing?
There's 925 grand in the pot. I lost last weekend because I put 25 grand on Wes Burns to score first in a 1-1 draw. So that was beaten. But I'm on 925 grand. But I've got quite a clear idea in my head of how I think this game is going to go. I think Gillingham are going to take the lead in this game. Ipswich are going to grind an equaliser. And when they get that equaliser, they'll completely break Gillingham's spirit in the manner that Stu's kind of just suggested that an early goal might, and then go on to win 3-1. So my bet is £75,000 at 8-1 on simply Ipswich to come from behind and win this game, which will return £675,000. That's what I'm betting this weekend.
So just repeat, for Town to come from behind and
75 grand. Yep, come from behind, win the game, 8-1, 75 grand.
Very, very interesting. It'd be very interesting to see what happens if Gillingham take the lead at Portman Road tomorrow, won't it? Yeah. Okay, then. Prediction time, then. You're saying Town are going to win, obviously, Hutch. Are you prepared to put a score on that?
Yeah, 3-1.
3-1. Stewie, what are you saying?
2-0.
2-0. Roscoe?
I was going to say that too, 2-0.
We'll come up with a different one then. Come up with a different score. 6-0. 8-0.
We're going to lose. Season's dead. 2-1. Why not? Gillingham will score a goal. They won't take the lead. We'll be 2-0 up and they'll just score a late goal just to sort of, here we go.
Okay. So we've got 3-1, 2-0, 2-1. I'm saying 7-0. And there we go. We reached the end of another podcast, friends. I hope you've enjoyed it. Chaps, any other business before I do my usual shambolic outro?
I would say in terms of team selection, we've seen the sort of the front three rotated quite a bit. I'd be going back to the Bash brothers this weekend. I want to see Norwood and Bon up front with Sonny Aluko providing the bit of the coolness in behind. Those were the three that played at Priestfield when Ipswich won 4-0. So for that reason, that would be the front three I'd be going with this weekend.
Very remiss of me not to mention team selection. What do you do do you stick with Dominic Thompson on the left, Hutchie? Penny's obviously sounds like he's available. Kane Vincent Young back on the grass and available.
I think Thompson was signed to play. So yeah.
Okay. So generally unchanged apart from that front three we just talked about. All right then. Any other business, chaps?
No other business.
No other business.
Okay. Just leave me then to remind you, please to support our sponsors, Manscaped. Use the code KOA at manscaped.com for 20% off and free delivery on all their excellent clobber there. Also, follow us across all our social medias, Kings of Anger on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and the other one, which I've forgotten about, Twitter. And also leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. It helps us greatly visibility-wise in the charts, means more people can see us. That's been the show this week. We've talked about Kieran McKenna. We've had some good fun with Mailbag, including which age we could beat up Mike Tyson at. And we've also predicted a win for Town against Gillingham. Let's hope we're right. Have a great weekend, and we'll speak to you again next week, friends.